So hi guys. Um, how's it going? Hope everyone is well. I will tell you, I'm very, very excited. I was at the Council for Exceptional Children National Conference last week and had a fantastic time and some really good feedback on the presentation that we did. And so as a result, I might end up doing part of that presentation today because I'm just excited. I always like presenting things that I know other people like because, yeah. Right now, though, I'm trying to look for something important. Plus, I still have people popping in, so I'm not stressing too much. Aha, here we go. So, copy link address. Yeah, I probably should. All right, I'm going to put a link in the chat. Oh, that is a disaster looking link. Can someone click on that and tell me if it worked? If not, I'm going to go figure out a better way to do it. I might figure out a better way to do it. You know what? Let's actually just, can I even delete that? Because that is a mess. Oh, it did work. All right, here's a shorter version of that. Fixed it. All right, so here's my shameless plug for everybody, including everybody who's on the recording. So between today and March 31st, the Council for Exceptional Children is offering free membership to all new members. Technically, yes, they do tend to focus on special education issues, including gifted education issues. However, one thing that they are doing right now, and the reason that this membership drive is free, and the reason that they're presenting it like this is because their big push right now is to advocate for all children. And with all the crazy things going on out in the world, they have a huge advocacy branch. They do training for things like Day on the Hill, where they actually train you how to be advocates to your legislators, and you can go meet with your legislators. They help arrange all that in the summertime. But more importantly, as we all know, when you are advocating, is often, especially with these groups, important to be able to say we represent X number, thousands of members, and our voice carries weight. So that is a reason why they are offering this free membership now, is to really gain that base. If you do join, you also do have the option of adding on any of the special groups. So like the Association of the Gifted tag is one of the choices. That's the one that I work through. But it is something, but if you just want to join, get the basic membership, it is free between now and March 31st, and it is good until next year. And so it tells you on here what you get. It talks about what you get if you're a special educator, if you're a general educator. I do know we had quite a few of our EML teachers, ELD teachers, whatever lettering I'm supposed to use for that, attended so they could learn more about working with EMLs in different populations. So if you're ever interested in joining a professional organization, this is a great time to do it because there's a lot of benefits to joining these guys, and it's free. And I mean, free is always good. Yes, the Council for Exceptional Children, CEC. So I'm going to pop that in the chat one more time. And if we have about 36 people, and if you guys see more people join later, I'd appreciate you tossing that into the chat. I am also going to add attendance because, copy link address. That sounds great. There's the attendance slide. So my general plan for us today is to finish talking about differentiation, and we're going to focus this time on, we're going to focus a little more this time on high prep differentiated tasks. So these are ones that definitely take more time. So I broke them up into two different groups. I think I will do, if my people who've already heard this don't mind, I think I do want to do my perfectionism talk today. That is going to require that you have a piece of paper and a pencil or a pen or a marker, preferably a pen or a marker in front of you. Like it doesn't require it, but I'm going to say it requires it. for one of the activities in that presentation. And then we'll make some decisions from there. Sound like a plan? I'm trying this new thing about like telling people what I'm going to do ahead of time instead of making a big surprise at the end. So with that, I'm going to share. I'm going to share the correct screen. Aha. All right, and you guys see high prep tasks with all the cute little things? Awesome. So this is one of my favorite things to talk about because I love the creativity that goes into developing a lot of these different, I love the creativity that goes into developing a lot of these. They do take time. And I think one of the most important things is this is not the kind of differentiation that you do all of the time. This is what you might do to launch a unit. This is what you might do to wrap up a unit. This is what you might do for an extension activity or for fun. So, and I think the other thing is, especially if you work in PLCs, this is a great time where you can divide up tasks where people in your group can take opportunities to make different things and then share along the way.
Yeah.
Because it does take a certain level of time and complexity to work through them. So the first one we're going to talk about is the raft. When I first learned about raft, I was actually very confused by them. I don't know why they're not that complicated, but they confused my brain. But the idea of the raft is that you are assigning the student or they are selecting a role, an audience, a format, and a topic in order to explain more about whatever it is we're talking about. So I'm going to go through a couple different examples of one. I didn't know that one was first this time. That's okay. What I love about actually the samples I have on here for rafts are finally you guys get examples that are not just English examples because I made other teachers write these so that we had some other opportunities to see different ways that you could use this method of differentiation. So I really do like the math one. So this is our example where, you know, you might have the students take on the role of the zero. And the zero's job is to talk to whole numbers. And they are going to write a campaign speech about the importance of the number zero. Math people know zeros are very important and they play a lot of different roles in math. And so this is that opportunity for students to be creative, but also demonstrate knowledge. I really like the exponent one too, about like the laws of exponents and explaining that to a jury, but just different ways that the kids can express what it is that they know. So our social studies raft, again, we have, you know, some more writing options with this one, but we have, again, those opportunities for the students to really take on a perspective and show their knowledge without having to, yes, you should have, this is why I have my pencil tonight. Post all slides. You think I'd remember that, but no, I wrote it down this time at least. You know, so for example, in the first one, the death of the Confederate soldier who wants to write a complaint about Pickett's charge. So obviously we need to know Pickett's charge did not go according to plan from the view of a Confederate soldier. And so they are complaining, and it gives an opportunity for the students to explain what it is that went wrong. Maybe explain why you're writing it to Robert E. Lee instead of other people who are part of the battle. I really like the Queen Victoria one, you know, in the audience are the grandsons, like how can we get along? Because we know that that was a big piece going into World War I was all of the kings of the different countries for the most part were cousins. And so just again, having that kind of unique perspective. I also like that we have the Great Wall of China. So, you know, using an object, something, a different way to, just a different way to kind of look at the role. There we go. This is one I'm most familiar with, and because I wrote it, and I really liked it because we actually used this as when we were introducing the Odyssey. In the beginning, honestly, it drags a little bit, especially when you're getting to know Penelope and Telemachus and some of the other suitors, and just getting that whole like kind of idea established. And so we really wanted to give the students a chance to be really creative before we sent them into a big research project. So this was their opportunity to just be hilarious. And, the awkward love poem, that they were 10th graders, they were amazing in awkward love poems. And then telling them to make them awkward really just, again, it let them, but sometimes the kids like who want to be good at things like poetry, but they're a little bit embarrassed about it. It was like their opportunity to shine, right? And how can you make reach out and do all of these different things? I also love things like Penelope with the playlist for the party where you're not looking for love. And we told the students that they had to pick their 10 songs and um, and give us explanations for them. And I will tell you, some kids did way more than 10 songs. We had some kids give us CDs or give us an MP3 playlist that we could download. It was in the olden days. Um, I really appreciated the effort that, it's something that was seemed sort of like super simple, but the kids put a lot of effort into it. We had some make us album covers to go with their whole setup. Um, and the nice thing with all of these were they're things that you could tweak. So like not every kid is going to have the especially if you're thinking about things like extended time, not every kid had to do 10 songs. That was like the base, but some kids may have done 5 songs. Some kids wrote their own songs. Like they kind of went about in whatever way, as long as we were getting the point that they were supposed to be expressing what it was that Penelope was feeling in the first couple of books of the Odyssey. Um, I like the science examples because these are examples that are a lot more visual, I think. And the science person who wrote this for us wanted to create things. Obviously we have the love letter, which is writing still, but the idea that you could do a travel guide of the water cycle, the idea that you could do a visual breakup of, the differences between night and day and why they needed to be separated. Again, that opportunity for our students to be able to show their knowledge and their creativity. And so this is the one where, there's different ways to look at the what is it that we can have them do. So I'm not going to belabor any of these. Yes, they'll be in the slides when I get them posted. So we had a writing piece from the perspective of a water drop going through the water cycle. I love that. So many of these honestly come from back like when we were kids and teachers had a little more freedom than we tend to have nowadays. But I think some of this is that opportunity for extensions where, for our kid who's moves quickly through the work or is refusing to do the work, it's an opportunity for them to still show that knowledge, even if it's not exactly what is in the curriculum. And I also, I don't have the slide up here anymore, but one thing I used to tell tell students really were that think about activities that made you excited that you remember from being a kid. Because if you're years old and you're still thinking about that activity that was so, important or meaningful to you, yes, you probably have to time warp it a little bit to make it relevant to kids nowadays, but there was something about that that got you really excited. And so thinking about what kind of drove that excitement, what pulled you in, I think is sometimes a good measuring stick, especially if we're feeling a little bit stuck about how we can present information to kids. So absolutely, the Think-Tac-Toe board is very much like a choice board, and the only difference really with this is um, that with the Think-Tac-Toe board, it really has us, what it does is it allows you a little bit more control as the teacher to give them kind of a must do, can do. So for example, we might always say, whatever you want all the kids to do, you put in your center block, and then they can choose, do you go across, do you go diagonal, up, down, whatever, as long as you do that center block. And so I've also seen this done as like a baseball diamond where everybody has to start at home plate, but then you get to decide what base you want to run to, and you can pick, and some teachers will have you do little things along each base. Some will say if you're going to go straight to third base, you don't have to do anything at first or second base. Just different ways to creatively think about that idea of must do, can do. I wrote a cute story about the digestive system. It was amazingly gross, but accurate. That is awesome. Honestly, I'd love to hear if you guys have other things in there that you remember from when you especially were in elementary school. Um, I'd love, go ahead, pop them in the chat because those are either things that we can talk about what that differentiation looks like, or, I mean, honestly, sometimes they're just fun to hear. And so again, I like that, this kind of layout gives you the opportunity to have some linguistically creative ones or some more physical ones. It's just a lot of different modalities to pull students in. And then again, this is actually a math example. I'm pretty proud. I have 2 math examples in here. I did a song about the central nervous system to Ice Ice Baby, to which we made a music video and still remember every word. Mine was the Avogadro's number. I wrote to the I Love You, You Love Me Barney song. That was my big one. Um, choice menus. So again, choice menus, you can set this up in a lot of different ways, but the idea is that you give the kids a target number and you have them select a variety of different things to create, and each item, whatever amount it's worth, is the effort or complexity. So, you might set something up like this where you have them, you can only have one entree, but you can have, you have to do one app, you have to have a side, you can't have more than 2 desserts, so whatever you want to set it up as, to create this idea where, again, the students have choice, but you also have some control in telling them, how they're going to make their meal. And then it's that idea of, well, yes, you have to have an appetizer, but you could either do a vocab definition word or you could create a quiz. And both of those are pretty, they're pretty low level when you think about Bloom's taxonomy, but they're also ones that make sure we have some of that foundational knowledge. The desserts are extras, right? Like adding a superhero or adding a villain to your story. Um, all different things that just add a little bit of extra flavor or fun to the work that you're having them do. The book reports. Oh, the one that sticks out for me was we had to do one on like historical figures, and then we had to give our book report dressed as the historical figure. And I know the kids are still doing this today, but I remember being Abraham Lincoln in the beer ditching a lot. So, and this is kind of the same idea as the choice menu. It's a little more guided in that you're giving them, you have to do certain things. So again, and this actually works a little bit better maybe for older kids. I don't know that, first graders want to hear about imperatives and negotiables, but sometimes our kids do. So for this one, we have a chemical problem in the environment. You have to define it. You have to discuss why, when, all those questions to it. You have these kind of concentrated topics, but even within them, global warming, greenhouse effect is huge, so there's a lot of choice within there as long as it falls under that particular area. We want to have a map, and you need to have talking points paper. Negotiables, you can pick one of these. One of them talks about the approximate cost. So kids who maybe are more mathematically inclined or economically inclined want to think through that. Our kids who are more linguistically or historically inclined might want to do the timeline of the evolution of the problem. And then there's even a challenge piece. Take your timeline into the future. Where could we be based on current trends? So again, even within that, not every kid might be able to do that futuristic thinking, but some kids can. And so it's a way that you can extend some of that learning, whereas others might be really concentrated in the how we got here piece. And then the options. You may do one or more of these. And sometimes what I would tell the kids with options is that, again, this is the fun piece. So I usually always told them they had to do something fun, but they could tell me when, yeah, fun is required. But they could kind of determine what that fun looked like. So this one, we have one on creating like a satirical cartoon or a fictionalized account of a person who lives in the area, a public service announcement. And then most of the time I include a propose your own idea, especially when we're talking about something that encourages creativity, because sometimes the kids will come up with some really cool things. And I never really want to limit the creativity if I can help it, if I can help avoiding limitation. A Ghana market day in my classroom, students created pretend products and we pretended to travel to Ghana. I love that. Anchor activities. So anchor activities, and I kind of said extension activities before, you could kind of, they sort of fall under the same umbrella. Um, the cool thing with the anchor activities are that it lets you pre-create things that are opportunities for when they're done, especially your kids who might finish early or quickly. But I also like, and sometimes I think the thing we don't think about with anchor assignments is we think of them again when we're done, right? It's something extra to do. But for your kids who like need processing time or they're overwhelmed or this, whatever the project you put in front of them, they're like, no, not going to do that. Um, Having an anchor activity is another way to draw them in where they could do the anchor activity. It's related to the work that you're doing, but it might not be exactly the work you're doing. And it gives them a little bit of a focused brain break. It allows them to stay within the content, but it's just something a little bit different. So, and they're also ones that you don't have to do in one sitting that they can pop in and out of or come back to. And one way you can do this, especially in the older grades, you can do this when we're thinking about grading is if you assign them, a minimum of one anchor activity per quarter, it doesn't really matter when they do it as long as it's done by the end of the marking period. And so they can pace themselves in terms of how they're moving forward or backward. And if they have time to do more than one, have them pick their favorite or their best one at the end for you to actually grade. Um, so this example, we have our students reading The House on Mango Street. Um, so one option they had was to compare the character Esperanza with the narrator from the short story 11. They're two girls about the same age, written by the same author. And so but very different personalities. And so this one is actually having them compare and contrast the personas of the two characters and, bringing in some evidence. So again, a kid who might be stumped on something has an opportunity to read something else and make some different connections. Another one I have on here is having them having them connect to the writing style. One is a short story, the other is written in more of a poetic free verse. So again, it's an opportunity to compare that. And then the last one, I really loved how Cisneros uses the metaphor of the balloon in multiple pieces of her writing. It really stuck out to me in these two. And so again, having the kids have more of like a open-ended kind of what's the purpose of the imagery of a balloon and giving them this idea of how to think beyond the stories into other contexts. This is another example that I wrote specifically when I taught a credit recovery class. And I just, that particular semester, almost every student I had was an EML student. Specifically, it has to do with the way credits work, where it doesn't matter how long you take any of your EML classes, you have to have English 9 to graduate. And so I had students who had been in their EML language classes and now they're juniors and seniors and they want to graduate, but they don't necessarily want to be in a classroom with ninth graders when they're older, which makes sense. Why ninth grade English is the only option, that's a question for the state. But one thing I did, because I had so many different Latino students in my class, was I had them talk about, House on Mango Street is written by a Mexican American woman, but it's written in English. And in fact, I found out as I was going through this that the translated copy of The House on Mango Street in Spanish is translated word for word. It's not, somebody gave me the word for it before. There's like a cultural translation where you like actually translate it to how Spanish is spoken as opposed to just taking the English words and writing them. And I cannot remember what that word is right now. Um, but I found it was super interesting for me, who speaks zero Spanish, to just kind of even learn about that. But I had the students read it and read a chapter in English and in Spanish, and then they had the opportunity to talk about, do the translations match? What do you notice? Um, I had them, some of them came back and told me about the difference between Mexican American dialect versus their dialect. And ways that different words had different meanings in their own context. And then another one they had a choice of doing was to write their own reflection or something about themselves in Spanish, so that we were able to pull in some of those languages. So I know, when we talk about honoring different cultures, Anchor activities, again, great way to do this because you can have multiple different opportunities for students and you can pull in some of those cultural tie-ins that might not be available in other opportunities. Oh, so this is a raft that we did where I had them, be reviewers or I don't know why this is all, oh, because it was a raft as part of the series of things they could pick for House on Mango Street. I do think my favorite was the internet troll and telling them that they had to give a summary of the book and give me school appropriate memes as to why they didn't like the book, because I always have a why you didn't like the book option. Oh, that's unexpected. Let me hit pause for a second because I am missing a slide or two. That was fun. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I don't know where the rest of that slideshow went. Awesome. All right, yeah, I'm gonna pause the recording real quick so that people watching the recording don't have to watch me stare at my screen for a hot second. So if you guys will forgive me a sec, we're gonna switch gears just a little bit. And I think I'm gonna have us talk through quickly on some ideas around strength-based instruction. So when we talk about strength-based instruction, we look at it often in two different ways, because in the world of special education, when we talk about strength-based instruction, what we are talking about is instruction where we're using students' strengths to help mitigate weaknesses. In gifted education, when we talk about strength-based instruction, we're often talking about focusing on student strengths and enhancing them because those are their areas of strength and we want them to grow and become stronger in their areas of strength. So, and our guest speaker next week will talk about this a bit more. There's a lot of terms that we use in both gifted and special education that are the same terms that has slightly different meanings, and this is one of those cases. I also like the cartoons in this one where we just really talk about our 2E kids. So the idea of this within Twice Exceptional, we do tend to lean a little bit more onto the idea of the mitigating strengths, or rather mitigating weaknesses. So it's not using your strength to fix things and overcome your weakness, or fix the weakness and then you will achieve. The idea of this is rather focus on your strengths, grow your strengths, manage your weaknesses, learn how to manage your weaknesses, and then just be who you are, to the best of your ability. So we don't use the strength necessarily as a crutch, but we are using it as a way to grow yourself. And so we want to focus both on the strength as becoming more of a strength, as well as focus on the strength in terms of using that to manage those weaknesses. So we talk a lot about choice, but part of that choice really is with the teacher, where we're coming in to make some of our more intentional decisions and making instructional choices ahead of time, so that our students have their maximum opportunity in order to show those strengths, and also in order to help them grow their strengths, helping them find topics that allow them to select their topic or choose their learning method. One of these great ways we can do is with technology, as we talk about a lot of different ways that students can now use technology. Well, a caveat with the technology piece, though, also, not all students do well with technology. And so some of the things we want to think about is allowing the student to take the lead, but knowing that, we do know sometimes they spend way too much time or they're off task. We don't necessarily want to take away their technology. We do want to teach them to use it responsibly, but we also want to make sure we have options with paper and pencil. Um, and that could include allowing them to write their work and take pictures of it and send it in so that we're avoiding executive functioning issues, or allowing them to, work together when it's appropriate. Sometimes it really is appropriate to just use a scribe. I'm not saying we should rely on that at all, but sometimes, it's easier for the students to converse, to get their ideas out with the adult, and just jot down those notes, or let them converse with you, and you listen to their responses so that you can gauge what it is that they know. Other things that you can do to support our students, we talked about this a lot in the beginning. A lot of our students have impacts in working memory and processing speed. And so when we think about how we're pacing our presentations, how we're managing those due dates and deadlines, but also building things like wait time into your presentations, building in wait time where you might call on students before you ask a question. I'm going to ask a question, and after I give you guys, we go through this, I'm going to have A, B, and C answer the question, and giving your twice exceptional student or your students who have some of those processing impacts the chance to be person B or C, so that they have a little bit longer to think about it, they have a little bit longer to model, or they have the opportunity to hear a modeled answer, so that they have the time to get through the question you're asking without feeling like they're on a timer or on a buzzer. And that is just a quick side by side where we're focusing on a deficit-based framework, which is more of an old-fashioned approach, versus the strengths-based framework. And yes, this is on my list of things to share. So I'm going to try something a bit different tonight. I haven't done this activity in a while. But the last time I tried it, I had a class of 73 people and it didn't work very well. I have 40 tonight, so I'm going to try this instead. And I'm going to put in the, I'm going to first share it with everybody because, all right, there we go. So in the chat, I just put a capture sheet. And what I want to give everybody the option to do right now, I'm going to go over this real quick, and then I'm actually going to put you guys in breakout rooms and give you a little bit of time to read one of the two articles, and then also look at the images there. And instead of necessarily creating your own metaphor, talk through some of these ideas with the people in your group. So let me share this for the folks who are watching so they know which link it is they're going to be looking for. So one thing that I do frequently, and truly a lot of gifted and twice exceptional people do, is we tend to talk in metaphors. But I love that because we actually have metaphors for being twice exceptional. So I grabbed a couple of articles and other visuals to talk through this idea of how can we represent twice exceptional, or how can we represent giftedness? So the first one is this story called Is It a Cheetah? It is a little bit on the long side. I think if I remember, it's like 5 pages, but you can definitely read the first 3 and get the gist. But the idea is comparing what it's like to be a gifted student with what it's like to be a cheetah. And so part of the questions I have, because every time I've done this with a group of gifted or twice exceptional people, it always turns into a throwdown on connections, but more often things they find problematic. But I think both of those are valuable in discussion. So then, yeah, we don't actually have bonus points. I forgot I had these things on here. Bonus points have no actual value and they're only redeemable for laughs. The other one, if you're into something a little more straightforward, but still a metaphor, is this idea of tall poppy syndrome. And the person who writes it, her website is called Raising Tall Poppies, but it's a metaphor they tend to use more in like Australia and New Zealand. But again, I think it's a good opportunity to see other perspectives on twice exceptionality. And then the last section on here I have are just some visuals that we've used in the past where we talk about, what it's like to be bright versus gifted versus being twice exceptional. So just an opportunity to look at those two images and then discuss maybe what other metaphors you could use for being twice or even thrice exceptional. So yeah, you don't have to fill out this. Like I said, I thought I would try. I'm going to pause the recording because the people watching don't need to watch me put you guys in breakout rooms. So actually, before we talk about the project, even though I just threw it in the chat, just a quick debrief. I heard a couple of really good things. So I said I gave you guys a couple extra minutes to discuss because some of the discussions are really rich. But does anybody want to share like a takeaway from their group or something that's stood out to them?
We found out that there was a lot of blame,
Mhm.
but there weren't any like kind of solutions offered, and that the language was kind of sometimes too dramatic.
Which one did you guys, was it all of them or did you read a specific article?
We read the cheetah. Is it a cheetah?
Mm.
And we felt very bad that the lions go eat the cheetah cubs. It was so sad to read that.
Yeah. And it's interesting because we actually have talked about that before as, one of the ways where like the metaphor falls apart. But then we also, and that might be what your group or another group was talking about, was the idea that sometimes our gifted cheetahs do get eaten by the lions as they get older and, they don't have a lot of defense mechanisms or other things, or they have a defense mechanism where they withdraw and they don't show their giftedness anymore because they don't want to be victim of real or perceived bullying or anything. I will say I do know some of the language in the Is It a Cheetah is problematic. It's almost 30 years old, so obviously there's been a lot of change. Um, but yeah, that's important things to pull out. Anyone else?
I was reading the Tall Poppy,
Hmm.
and I think a lot of it comes from just the stereotype that smart people are always gonna demean people that are athletic, and then so we push the idea of somebody being smart to be celebrated, and
Hmm.
then it kind of still again takes away the sunshine from when they are doing good. So it's like you want your kids to do good, but then they can't do too good because then you're worried that they're gonna say something mean or make other people feel less than. And often the case is we make the people that are smart feel less than for not being athletic or into the norms.
Hmm. Yeah, and Tall Poppy is interesting because it's written by a parent as opposed to a teacher. Um, but yeah, it brings up a lot of good questions about how we value people and how we address what people's strengths and weaknesses are just in general conversation. Anyone else? The groups come up with any other metaphors or better metaphors that they thought might work for what is twice exceptional?
I thought about a metaphor about the Sphinx that
Mm-hmm.
they always needs their wings,
Mm-hmm.
but I have issue with using damaged wings. I don't want to use damaged, and I need to find another word in English that would say like the wings are there, but they're not really. You see, that's the weakness part. It is a sphinx.
Like they're not functional.
They're not functional, but I don't want to say damaged because then I'm uh, like I want to almost say it needs support. It can do better if it receives the right support
Mm-hmm.
that I'm still looking for.
I like the sentiment, at least. I know what you're saying. Like the language might not connect exactly, but I do know what you're saying about looking for that, um, and needing the support for what's there. If anybody else comes up with anything else, do feel free to toss it in the chat. And I appreciate, I actually stopped doing those because the last couple times I tried them, I would go in and everybody's camera's off and everybody's microphone was on mute and it was just sitting in silence. So I appreciate you guys actually diving into this, and I will endeavor to have another chat discussion with one of our remaining classes. So I do want to take a few minutes to go over the case study. And I know case study sounds really scary, and it's not meant to be. And I will also tell you that my examples are a lot. I don't actually expect you guys to produce necessarily the level of what the examples are. Most of my exemplars are ones that we have developed. Anyway, I'll go through it and then I will explain better. So I put it in chat, but I'm also going to share my screen just so I can talk through some of these pieces. And hopefully that's visible for most people. All right, so for our case study, really my overall purpose of the case study is, one, it's not truly a case study, but that's what I put in the original application, so that's what we continue to call it. It really is meant to be more of a project-based learning for you guys. What I ultimately want is for you to do something that is meaningful in your position, in your job, in your life, that shows me that you have gained an understanding of twice exceptionality and how it applies to the work that you do. So I'm going to walk you through some examples and projects I have on here. I also will tell you that I will tell you as we go through. So the first one we have on here is the general education teacher option. This is going to sound super complex. It is not meant to be super complex. And the guest speaker we have next week, Dr. Claire Hughes Lynch, is actually the creator of the Trellis and Bloom model. So she's actually going to walk you guys through it, talk to you about it. She's about to publish a book about it. So you guys are really on kind of the cutting edge. We've been working with this model for about 2 years-ish, I want to say now. And so actually samples that are in the book from the in Claire's book were initially developed by MCPS teachers. So that's where I'm going to say the example looks scary, because this is the example that's going to be in the book. Claire and I took a teacher's example and we expanded it into one that would be an exemplar for a published book. I do not expect you to create a lesson plan that is an exemplar for a published book, but I'm providing you an exemplar that's for a published book so that you guys can kind of get that like high lens idea of where we came up with some of the information and what I want you to think about, not necessarily put completely in writing. So what you do for this particular lesson plan is we ask you to pick a student. If you know for sure you have a twice exceptional student, if you don't have a twice exceptional student and you're not sure, pick a student who has different needs, even if they don't fall into those ranges of twice exceptionality. You can always pick a gifted student. You can pick a high performing student. There's a lot of different ways you can go about this. So I'm going to walk you through what we do with our student, and really our student becomes a lens through which we view the rest of the class as we make some of these changes. So this is our example student, Marcel. And the teacher described Marcel as having strengths in math, creativity, liked listening to stories, all of those things. He wants to be an investment banker in grade 3. That kind of gives you a perspective of the kind of kid. He also had an IEP for dyslexia and ADHD, goals for decoding comprehension, writing mechanics, task initiation. You can read all the different accommodations we had there. Also, we had the executive functioning considerations. We knew the student had very variable scores in executive functioning. I know for gen ed teachers, you guys don't always know all of these details, although they should be in the IEP, which you should have a copy of. If this is something you need support with, let me know because I have access to them. So if the student you're looking at, you don't have a lot of details on like this, I can always help you kind of sort that piece out. We looked through pre-assessment data. I will tell you, we dug really deep for pre-assessment data. I do not anticipate that you guys will necessarily have to dig this deep. Obviously, we did some of this after the fact because he's a third grader, and we later pulled up his state scoring because now he's actually like a fifth grader. So I was able to pull his state score. I know you guys don't know that when they're in third grade, so take it for what it is. But you can see, 88th percentile for verbal comprehension, had different issues in phonemic awareness. He also was at a level 4.4 for his access score. Hello. Hi, I'm recording. Go away. Bye. Thank you. Parenthood. And then we also had other cultural considerations. He was parents were first generation immigrants. Student was identified as an EML and received multilingual learner services at the time. But also, like we saw in English, had a high verbal comprehension index. So, we saw a lot of variability with him. We then next looked at his general classroom profile. And again, the point of this is really for you to think about all the differences that you have in your classroom. And at this point, I will also add that I don't ever expect that people do all of this work every single time they write a lesson, but they do expect that you think about these things like, okay, I'm about to do this. How many IEPs do I have? How many students do I have who are gifted? How many of these things are ready to go? How many of them are going to need some sort of something that's more than what I'm doing for everyone else? In regular teacher terms. This is a little fancier, but that's what we're trying to kind of reflect. So I would like you to actually do this profile here for your class. How many students do you have who are gen ed students? How many students with 504s? How many students with IEPs? Like actually do that breakdown for me. And then this is your opinion. And I do have on here, I have on the template what we mean when we say reteaching compacting. So you can look on the template and it says like reteaching are people who need the initial instruction repeated more than once, whereas remediation are our kids who need more baseline instruction to bring them up to where we're planning on doing instruction now. Compacting, we go it quicker. Acceleration, they need to move faster forward. All of those things are defined. So the Trellis and Bloom template. It's scarier than it looks. So the first thing we're going to do is identify our state level standard. That is a copy and paste. Hopefully you know what standard you're working on. In the lesson objectives piece where we have this idea of all students, most students, some students. So the idea of all students is that essentially everybody in your classroom should be able to do this to meet standard. Most of your students, so maybe like 80% of your students should be able to get to the next level. This is for your advanced students, your students who are always a little bit ahead of what's going on. One of the things Claire is going to do next week is teach you how to use things like Magic School or ChatGPT to differentiate this so that you don't have to magically beat your brain up in order to come up with this. This is part of her presentation, so I'm not going to belabor that now. But again, forewarning, yes, I have all these things on here, but Claire's going to give you tools on how to get through that. And that's the same thing across the board. I will tell you, as I was the one who took this and beefed it up to be this level, and I worked with Claire to do it as well. Some of these things we would take and say, okay, ChatGPT, this is what we expect everybody to do. How might you enrich this? How might you make this more complex? And ChatGPT threw out some ideas, and we liked some of them and we hated some of them. And some of them we took and said, say this in a different way, please, and played with it. So again, I don't expect that you come up with all of this magically on your own. I also don't expect that you're going to necessarily, because I know the way that we do things in MCPS is not necessarily the way that all of these kinds of lesson plans work out. But in general, How are you opening your class? How are you getting students engaged in the classroom? That is what this main topic is right here. What are most of the kids doing? Your trellises are, what are we doing for the kids who need more support in general? Not necessarily Marcel specifically, but what do my kids who need more support need? So for example, this one, they were reading a poem called Fair Weather Clouds. So our suggested activity was use a whiteboard, actually go out to the window and look at some real clouds and write down on a whiteboard words that come to mind. So things that we might do to support students with language needs, whether it's because English isn't their first language or they have a language disability, you might come up with a word bank ahead of time to help those students. You might give them a list of words and have them circle words so that they're not taking the time to laboriously write out words that we're not really going to use all that much. You might have them draw shapes instead of writing out words. Supports. So blossoms are things that we can do to make the activity more complex or challenging. So for this one, we might challenge a student. Marcel, we know, has very strong vocabulary. So maybe we'll say, we only want you to use adjectives to describe these clouds. Nothing that is a noun, nothing that is a verb, just adjectives. Takes a little more brain power to kind of focus down your answers and make sure that you're giving what we want. A complex activity might be drawing, depending on your student. We have some kids who are amazing drawers, and maybe that would be a more complex activity. Maybe instead, have them do this main activity where they do the same as everybody else is, but then have them make a prediction of what they think the word fair weather means. So again, you're finding ways to increase that complexity. And those are all low prep things, because with the exception of creating a word bank, those are all things you can have the kids do with the whiteboard in front of them. This column tells us, okay, well, Marcel has an IEP, so are there things that we need to do differently specific to Marcel? And that could be, specific to any kids with IEPs in the class or specific to your one student through your lens. This last column is really meant to be more of a planning opportunity, because I know most of you either don't have co-teachers or don't have an opportunity to do a lot of planning with your gen ed person. So this might be, do you go to your ELD teacher ahead of time and say, hey, we're going to be doing this activity and the students are going to need a word bank to help them describe clouds. Is that something you could help us develop? So those might be ways that we reach out, or these might be ways when we are doing our planning to say, hey, let's sit down. This is what we're thinking about. They're not necessarily meant to say, we need a co-teacher now. On the other hand, it's that opportunity to say, I need a co-teacher for about 20 minutes during this particular lesson. So when we're mapping out what we're doing with our other support teachers in the building, is this something that the school can provide to me for this specific period of time? So we go from there. The next part we have is direct instruction. How are we working through breaking apart this poem? The next part is the students' expression piece. They're putting out their ideas. And then that last piece is the exit ticket. I also know this was some benchmark, so breathe easy, teachers. I know CKLA is going to do a whole different thing, but that's where we were going with this. Again, it is a very deep and complex draft. I want to see more than anything you're thinking. If you decide, you really want to focus on engagement, you really want to focus on response, I'm okay with that. I just want to see that you're thinking about all of the pieces of the puzzle and then putting your effort into where it's going to make the most difference for you and your students. No, the profile thing, that's on the front page, right? Oh, just gonna do this real quick. I share this with somebody else who teaches the class, and that's something she added. We're not doing that one. You can ignore that part. The thing about profiles was really, if you want to do a true case study, you don't really have a student, we provided that profiles piece, but I wouldn't worry about that for me. Okay. So, gen ed teachers, digest, don't freak out. If you have questions, I will come back around for questions. I'm going to keep moving through some of my suggestions on here. So my special ed friends, I have 3 choices for you right now. Choice number 3 is work with your co-teacher to do choice number 1. Very straightforward. Choice number 2 is if you have a current 2E student, tell me about your student. Tell me about, goals that you've created for them based on what you've learned here, reflecting on what you can do. However you want to present that, if you want to do recording, if you want to write a reflection, but really reflecting on how what we've talked about in this class has helped you develop these goals for your student, and then what are the goals that you've developed. I don't need every single goal that you've written, unless you want to show me, I'm okay with that too. The other thing is if you're really struggling with that goals piece, you can always, as part of the assignment, make an appointment with me and we can problem solve goals together. If you really genuinely have like a 2E kids and you have no idea how to write some goals for them, that's something that we can work out as well. And then choice 3, which is actually listed as choice 2, because apparently I can't go in any form of order. Creating a short presentation for your department setting where you can talk about something very specific about Twice Exceptional. I do not expect you to be huge experts on everything, but would it make sense to do a short presentation for your colleagues around what does asynchronous development look like in kids of this age? Or, do we need to talk about equity topics when it comes to identifying gifted and twice exceptional children? Is that something that would be meaningful for your school? So kind of creating that piece and putting that in as your presentation. My counselor friends, choices really are around either looking at an action plan. I have a Ritzy option. Hold tight, Miriam. I'm not going to lose you. But otherwise, yes, because you case manage a 2E student, you might do really well with that one. So my counselors, I have either creating an executive functioning plan for a twice exceptional student that you work with, or creating a social emotional lesson that can either be implemented with a small group of twice exceptional kids that you work with, or a mixed group that you work with, or creating one that could be implemented by a para if a student needs some type of pullout. So really putting your particular lens and skills into working with a twice exceptional student. And if you do need more resources, I'm always happy to share those, but really making sure that you're reflecting on the CASEL standards around specifically self-management and self-regulation. So for my, and Miriam, this might actually be a little bit so an option for you as well as a RITC. So if you're staff development, GT liaison, you're the AIST, you are the content specialist, you are the RITC, you are in a school-wide position. And so one thing that we talked about as an option was maybe developing a one-stop shop of resources for about twice exceptional and GT education that is focused to the needs of your school. So again, do you need to focus on, quick facts to know about supporting twice exceptional kids in the classroom? Do you need to focus on, equity and understanding how students look different, how gifted students look different than what a lot of people assume, and twice exceptional students look different than what people assume? So that could be resources, it could be specific ways to do enrichment if you're a content specialist, it could be ways to help scaffold or extend activities. Again, thinking about what it is, this is a really wide range of folks in here. So thinking about what is specific and meaningful to your area. And then the other part of that would be a short presentation that you could give during a department meeting, or, whatever your focus is, to share this resource with your department meeting. And then, since I assume you're in a leadership role and you have the ability to do that, a reflection on how it went or other such things. And the other nice thing is when people share these with me, I do often push them out to other school teams. If you want your name off of them, I'm fine to do that as well. But I've gotten some really good resources out of teachers over the years, and so I like that. I don't think I have any school administrators in this group, so if I'm wrong, please hit up in the chat, but I'm going to skip that one for now. I don't think I have any central office here either, so I'm going to skip that one for now. I also don't think I have any paras. I know it's blank. Paras I usually work with one-on-one to come up with something, but I'm working on that. For my speech language pathologists. So I have a couple of options for you guys. So option one is to do an actual case study of a student that you have already worked with or are currently working with. Um, and a lot of this is really about reflecting on the data that you have, targeted strategies that you're using, and why it is that you are using the strategies that you are, and how it supports their giftedness, and how it supports their how it helps support them. You know, we know a lot of times these guys can pass all their tests. They can probably teach the class on it, but application in the real world is where they struggle. So how are you helping bridge that gap for those students? Option two is to do a professional learning. I've had a couple speech paths do this for me about, again, those hidden needs. So instead of just focusing on as a case study for one student, you know, how would you talk to other speech and language pathologists who might not know a lot about working with twice exceptional kids, and break down kind of these pieces, including strategies that you can suggest. And then the last one is the toolkit option. You know, and again, that idea of a toolkit for other speech language pathologists, or even for families that my kid's twice exceptional. I know they're doing this, but I really need support. Again, it doesn't have to be super complicated, but something that is readable and understandable for non-SLPs. You guys speak your own language. I do not understand your language. I understand like this much of it, enough to know I don't understand. So like, how would you talk to somebody like me who knows nothing about your world on how I can support a kid who has different communication needs, who also might be highly verbal, but also impacted? I think I have some OTs in here. I'm working on that. I haven't had an OT before, so that's why I don't have an OT tab. But I'm thinking something similar when it comes to our OTs. If that doesn't make sense to you, and honestly, for everybody, if none of this makes sense to you and you want to do something else, shoot me an email with what you're thinking about, because I'm all about choice. So my early ed people, I've been thinking about this a little bit, and I don't remember who I met with the other day. Jessica, was it you maybe? Anyway, I actually made a friend at the conference last week who specializes in early, young, 3, 4-year-old twice exceptional kids. It's like her favorite thing to talk about. I'm like, I am so glad other people like to talk about it. And then I made a friend in Baltimore City who also likes to talk about it. So I tossed some ideas around with them. I'm actually also hoping to pull together some resources for you guys to touch base with them. Some of that's in progress, but what we kind of came up with was this idea of, you know, why did you think that kid was twice exceptional? You know, we don't identify twice exceptional in MCPS at that age, but yet, yeah, Jessica, it was you. What led you to think like this is the direction we're going with this kid? And then figuring out a targeted enrichment activity that is play-based. And so, you know, again, thinking out what do you do with kids that age anyway? Honestly, I don't know because they're little. But what do you do with kids that way, and how would you enrich that? How would you make that more complex? And then doing a reflection. Most of my things say reflection, presentation, interpret that as you will. But again, something that, you know, maybe we could share with other, you know, so next time I have a pre-K person who's like, I don't know what to do, I can be like, look at this awesome presentation. But, you know, just doing an activity with them that makes sense for what that profile is. And then also, you know, if you tried it more than once, did you have to adapt it? And then reflections about where it went from there. I do not know why that goes from 9 to 11. Counting is apparently a problem for me right now. But this is my relatively gifted friends. So we've talked about this very briefly in this class. I don't often talk about it a lot because it can be super confusing if all of this is new to you. But really, our relatively twice exceptional kids are kids who are usually in significantly impacted, or students with significant cognitive impacts who don't fit the traditional definition of twice exceptional because they're not on both ends of the bell curve. But when you think about them within their own small population, they are on opposite ends of that bell curve. So, you know, when we've talked before about, you know, if 100 is average and we're talking about kids who have IQs 130, 140, 150, there's a 50-point spread between 150 and 100. On the other end, if you're talking about 100 down to 50, that's another 50-point spread. So if I'm talking about, you know, say a student who has some skills in the 80s or 90s range and other skills down in the 30s and 40s range, that's still a 30 to 40, 50-point spread. It's just not over the entire bell curve like most of us are dealing with. And so in that setting, those students are twice exceptional and they need things done differently. And if that was confusing and you don't work with those guys, just put all of that information outside your brain. But for those of you guys who do work with this population, so we're talking kind of similar to the pre-K one, creating an individualized enrichment plan for that student around that specific area of strength. What is it that is their strength? What is it that is their interest? And how can you take that specific need or specific strength need and build a task around it or an activity around it that lets that strength really stand out and shine? And then also thinking about, and I know this is a relatively short period of time, so I'm not expecting that you trial and error it multiple times, but thinking about implementing it. And then after you implement it, how would you change it potentially in the short term and the long term to meet the needs of that student who is an outlier in that particular setting? And then, like I said, everything in mine says something about the presentation. Interpret that as you will, as long as it's something that if I read it by myself, I'll understand what it is that you're doing and what you got out of it. So a couple things in the chat I saw. So we had somebody who said discussion made me realize the importance of teachers and understanding how to differentiate and how all students should have access. Yes, that was from our earlier discussion. How all students should have access to all of the learning. Absolutely. Answer the Canva question. So yeah, so Miriam, my Ritzy, I think you're my only Ritzy. Do what makes sense for you because you are case managing a twice exceptional kid. You might want to do that project, but you are also a Ritzy, so you might want to do the department project. And if you want to talk it out, we can do that. See, special education, love option 2, especially sharing teaching strategies with general education teachers. I absolutely love it. And one of the things I love about that also is it's a lot easier to say to your principal, like, hey, I'm taking this class. I really need to do this presentation. Can you help me out? Can I present? Use and abuse me. That's okay. I don't mind if that's something that you'd love to do. Yeah, so if you're thinking about doing one of these presentations, again, not more than 30 minutes because yeah, I don't know any administrator out there who's going to give you more than 30 minutes anyway. But that also is a lot of extra work for you guys. So I absolutely would cap it at 30 minutes. 20 to 30 sounds reasonable to me. And if you're talking about a presentation in terms of like a reflection and telling me what you learned, like 5 to 10 minutes, most of you guys can probably express to me what you've learned and reflected on in 5 to 10 minutes of talking. But yeah, an actual presentation to others, I would say no more than 30 minutes. And honestly, I've had some really effective 15-minute presentations, so I'm not super hung up on time so much as I am on content understanding and reflection. I can't be succinct, but other people can. Is there anybody I missed? Could we present something more about the biology brain info from Matt? Yes, if there is a speaker that you just really connected with and you want to do something more in depth about that speaker or their information, 100% please do. Yeah, always, if you want to speak to me, definitely set up a time through my calendar. There should be a link on the Canvas classroom page, or you can reach out to me and I'll send you my link. That is absolutely the best way to find me. But yeah, if you wanted to deep dive into any of our speakers, actually, friend of Matt, I actually found another presentation of Matt's that I don't think I actually have on the Canvas page right now. I should go back and put in where he was actually talking about twice exceptionality and LGBTQ population. So if you want to deep dive what he talks about, that's great. And yes, I'll share it with him because I think he'll find it great. My PTD coaches. Ah, la, la. You know what, Janice? Shoot me an email because I actually have a very specific project.
Oh,
Um,
specific?
I
Fantastic.
do. So I don't know if you were at the very first training that I did with you.
I was, and that's why I'm here today because of that
Oh,
first,
awesome.
because you came and presented. I was so excited to take your class.
Oh, I'm excited. So remember, maybe you don't, but there was a question about how we applied that rubric to a twice exceptional kid versus the general
Okay.
population. And I will get back to you guys on that. I have not stopped thinking about that question. I don't have a great answer, but I would love somebody who's more familiar with it to do an exploration of that. And I actually have some resources that I got from William and Mary, not the
Ooh.
actual king and queen, but like the researchers at
Yeah.
William and just to be clear. I got some really cool resources at a conference I went to that I think did a good job of bridging that question, but I don't have the brain capacity to do it. So shoot me an email and I will get you those resources, and then you can do a project where you answer that question and
Oh, okay. I'm going to set up an appointment with you first.
awesome. Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Um, yes, absolutely, because all that stuff is also on my desk at work. So here's the deal. If you are doing a presentation, you can either present it to actual people, like in your building or wherever. If you are not able to actually present, if your principal's like, nope, not gonna happen, or RTs like that, that's fine. You can either just send me the presentation with like a written reflection. You can record yourself giving the presentation. Actually, I haven't had anyone do that before. If you are feeling super great about it, I am also happy to set up. I don't really think we have, I tried that the first time where I asked people to do their presentations and like everybody freaked out on me. And so I took that part out of the class. But what I could do is put together a night where people want to present, and invite anybody who wants to come and present live to listen to each other and share your presentations. You guys are a lot more willing to connect than previous classes have been. So I'm happy to set that up. Um, and it would probably be just a Monday later in April after spring break, where we don't have something currently scheduled. So just to kind of keep that idea in mind. Um, yes, in a perfect world, you are submitting your case study, whatever it is, like the presentation to me. And I would love for you to do it at your school, in your department. Um, Whatever is the correct environment for you. But if that doesn't happen, that's not a penalty. It's just, like I said, for me, it's about doing something that's meaningful to you, that is going to make a difference in your profession and your teaching life. I'll also throw out there, I've had people who've decided to do parent presentations. I've had people who've decided to do twice exceptional um, for non-English speaking parents. So, how would they put that together? I actually have a one-sheeter for how do you advocate for your twice exceptional kid if you are, um, some stuff we've been putting together for our handbook. And there's honestly projects that people have given me that I have incorporated into the handbook that is being republished at the end of this year. Um, so yeah, if you don't have a chance to present it in the real world, absolutely, when we have that type of material, I absolutely incorporate it in as many places as I can. So it is not work that goes to waste. But like I said, if you have another project that's near or dear to your heart or just makes more sense for you, please let me know. And um, I'm always happy to work with you to make it happen. Do you have any other questions for the good of the group? All right, so I will stay on for a few extra minutes because we're going to end up ending a little bit early tonight. So next week, for those of you guys who are not on super early today, so I made a boo-boo when I scheduled this class, and I forgot that I got my daughter tickets to see one of her favorite performers next Monday. Yay, Ally the Piper. So I will be taking her to a concert next Monday. However, we will still have class. You will have Dr. Claire Hughes Lynch from Cleveland State University presenting about the trellis and bloom model. She will also be talking about how we can use AI to differentiate for our students. And she will also give you guys a little bit more on the history of twice exceptionality. Yes, absolutely. I will add a couple of you guys as soon as I figure out how to be my co-host for that. So as soon as somebody logs on, you guys can get the recording started for me. Please feel free to put the attendance and whatnot into the chat for people. But yeah, Claire will talk a little bit about the history of 2E. She'll talk about the Trellis and Blossom. Keep saying Trellis and Bloom. They changed the name, Trellis and Blossom. And she will talk to you again about like some of those AI things. And Claire also, she actually founded the program on training twice exceptional teachers, not twice exceptional people, training twice exceptional teachers. So if you go through her program, you actually would come out with a special education certificate and a gifted education certificate in Ohio, which does have reciprocity to Maryland. So I actually have had a couple of people who have taken her classes and after taking this class, and she'll give you information on that if you are interested at all. But she is one of the big gurus in Twice Exceptional and specifically in training teachers to be teachers of the Twice Exceptional. So it'll be a great class. I listen to Claire talk anytime I possibly can, and I will probably watch the recording after that it happens next week. So I apologize for my poor scheduling, but I did get you a really cool speaker. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. And then if there's any other questions, we can do that after the recording ends. So we'll stop the share and we're going to stop the recording.